Bella Cucina was a quaint, family-owned Italian restaurant nestled in the heart of a bustling city. Known for its authentic recipes and warm ambience, it had been a beloved fixture in the community for decades. However, beneath its charming exterior, a dark and sinister history lurked, waiting to be unearthed. Sophia had always been fascinated by the culinary arts. Fresh out of culinary school, she was thrilled to land a job at Bella Cucina. The head chef, Marco, was a renowned figure in the culinary world, and the opportunity to work under his guidance was a dream come true. Her first day was filled with the usual bustle of a busy kitchen, sizzling pans, the clatter of utensils, and the aroma of fresh herbs. Marco, a tall, stern man with a thick Italian accent, welcomed her warmly but with a hint of caution in his eyes. "Sophia, you'll do well here if you follow the rules," he said, his gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary. "And whatever you do, never stay after closing time." Sophia nodded, dismissing his warning as a harmless quirk. But as the night wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The other staff seemed unusually tense, and there was a palpable sense of unease in the air. A few weeks into her new job, Sophia began to notice strange occurrences. Late at night, when the restaurant was empty, she would hear faint whispers echoing through the halls. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the voices grew louder and more distinct. One evening, as she was finishing up her prep work, she heard a whisper right behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. Her heart pounded as she scanned the room, but everything seemed normal. She shook her head, trying to dispel the fear that was creeping in. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Sophia decided to stay after closing one night. She hid in a small storage room, waiting for everyone to leave. As the last of the staff departed, the restaurant fell into an eerie silence. Hours passed, and just as Sophia was about to give up, the whispers began again. This time, they were accompanied by the sound of footsteps. She peeked out from her hiding spot and saw a shadowy figure moving through the dining area. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized it wasn't one of the staff. The next day, Sophia confided in her friend and coworker, Lena. Lena's eyes widened in fear as Sophia recounted her experience. "You shouldn't have stayed," Lena whispered, glancing around nervously. "There's a reason Marco warned you." Lena explained that Bella Cucina had a dark secret. Decades ago, the original owner, Giuseppe, was obsessed with creating the perfect recipe. He believed that infusing the food with the essence of the human soul would elevate it to new heights. To achieve this, he performed dark rituals, sacrificing unwitting victims and trapping their souls within the walls of the restaurant. The rituals continued until Giuseppe mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of fear and death. The staff believed that the trapped souls still haunted the restaurant, and the whispers Sophia heard were their desperate attempts to be freed. Sophia was horrified but determined to uncover the truth. She began researching Giuseppe and his sinister rituals. Her search led her to an old, dusty book hidden in the restaurant's attic. The book detailed Giuseppe's experiments and the dark magic he used. As she delved deeper into the book, strange things began to happen. Objects moved on their own, and she felt an oppressive presence watching her. Despite the mounting danger, Sophia was resolute. She knew she had to put an end to the haunting. One night, as the whispers grew louder and more frantic, Sophia decided to confront the spirits. Armed with the knowledge from the book, she performed a counter-ritual to break the curse. The restaurant shook violently as the trapped souls were released, their anguished cries echoing through the night. Just as Sophia thought it was over, the temperature dropped, and the lights flickered ominously. The air grew thick with malevolence as a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was Giuseppe, his eyes burning with rage and hunger. "You think you can undo my work?" he snarled, his voice echoing with otherworldly power. "I will not be stopped." Sophia's heart raced as she stood her ground, clutching the book tightly. She recited the final incantation, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. A blinding light filled the room, and Giuseppe screamed in agony as he was pulled into the abyss. The restaurant fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the last of the trapped souls were freed. Sophia collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. In the aftermath, Bella Cucina underwent a transformation. The staff, no longer haunted by fear, found a renewed sense of purpose. The restaurant thrived, its reputation growing even more prestigious. Sophia, hailed as a hero, continued her culinary journey, her skills honed by the trials she had faced. The whispers were gone, and the dark history of Bella Cucina became a distant memory. But Sophia never forgot the lessons she had learned. She knew that some secrets were best left buried and that true mastery of the culinary arts came from passion and dedication, not dark magic. As for the book, Sophia hid it away, ensuring that its dark knowledge would never be used again. The restaurant thrived, a beacon of light and warmth, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of darkness. And so, Bella Cucina continued to serve delicious meals, its walls now echoing with laughter and joy instead of despair. But every now and then, when the lights flickered just so, Sophia would feel a chill and remember the night she faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The old bistro on Pine Street had been closed for decades, its windows boarded up and doors padlocked. Whispers in the town spoke of a tragic fire that had claimed lives and left a scar on the community. When Sarah and Jake, a young couple with dreams of opening their own restaurant, bought the place, they saw potential in its history and charm. They poured their savings into renovations, carefully preserving the vintage decor while updating the kitchen with modern equipment. The night before the grand opening, Sarah was polishing the mahogany bar while Jake double-checked the menu. They had invited friends and family for a soft opening, hoping to iron out any last-minute issues. As Sarah worked, she noticed a small, old-fashioned cookbook tucked behind a loose brick in the wall. The cover was worn, and the pages yellowed with age. Intrigued, she brought it to Jake, who shrugged and suggested it might be a fun addition to their decor. Little did they know, this book held secrets that were better left undiscovered. The soft opening was a success. Friends and family raved about the food, the ambience, and the painstaking attention to detail. As the last guests left, Sarah and Jake sat down at the bar, exhausted but exhilarated. The only odd moment had been when an elderly woman, who neither of them recognized, approached Sarah with a warning. "Be careful with that book," she had whispered, pointing to the old cookbook now displayed prominently on a shelf. "Some recipes should never be made." Sarah had laughed it off, assuming the woman was just eccentric. After all, the book was filled with quaint, old-fashioned recipes, nothing that seemed particularly dangerous. That night, as they locked up, a chill ran through the restaurant. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the lights flickered. Sarah brushed it off as a quirk of the old building, but Jake couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The first week of business was bustling. Word had spread quickly, and reservations were booked solid. Everything seemed perfect, but small, unsettling incidents began to occur. Pots and pans would fall off hooks without explanation, and the temperature in the kitchen was always colder than the rest of the restaurant. One evening, as Sarah was closing up, she heard a faint humming coming from the kitchen. She walked in to find the old cookbook open on the counter, turned to a page she hadn't noticed before. The recipe was for a dish called the Shadow Stew, with ingredients and instructions that seemed oddly specific and archaic. Feeling a strange compulsion, Sarah decided to try the recipe. She gathered the ingredients, many of which were unusual and hard to find, and began to cook. As the stew simmered, the kitchen filled with a thick, dark smoke. The lights flickered, and Sarah swore she saw a shadow moving in the corner of her eye. When Jake came in, he found Sarah staring at the pot, her eyes glazed over. He shook her out of her trance, and they decided to dump the stew, agreeing it was too strange to serve. The incidents grew more frequent and more sinister. Staff began reporting sightings of a dark figure lurking in the kitchen, and the cold spots became unbearable. One night, a waiter quit on the spot after claiming a shadowy hand had grabbed him. Desperate, Sarah and Jake called in a priest to bless the restaurant. The priest, an elderly man with kind eyes, walked through the bistro, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers. When he reached the kitchen, he paused, his face growing pale. "There is something very wrong here," he said. "This place is haunted by a dark spirit, one that was awakened by an act of great evil." He pointed to the cookbook. "That book is a gateway. You must get rid of it." Sarah and Jake agreed, and that night, they took the book to a secluded spot and burned it. As the flames consumed the pages, they heard a guttural scream, and the ground beneath them trembled. For a few days, the restaurant seemed to return to normal. The temperature stabilized, and the shadowy figure disappeared. Business was booming, and Sarah and Jake felt a renewed sense of hope. But the calm was short-lived. One night, as they were locking up, they heard a loud crash in the kitchen. Rushing in, they found the room in disarray, pots and pans scattered, and the stove turned on, flames roaring. In the center of the chaos stood a dark, humanoid figure, its eyes glowing red. Jake grabbed a knife, but it passed through the figure as if it were made of smoke. The entity lunged at Sarah, who screamed as a cold, clammy hand gripped her wrist. In a moment of desperation, Jake grabbed a nearby pot of boiling water and threw it at the figure. It let out an unearthly shriek and dissipated into the air. Shaken and terrified, Sarah and Jake realized they needed help beyond what a priest could provide. They reached out to a paranormal investigator, a woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, who specialized in cleansing haunted locations. Dr. Carter arrived with a team of specialists and equipment designed to detect and confront supernatural entities. She spent hours interviewing the staff, reviewing security footage, and conducting EMF, electromagnetic field, sweeps of the restaurant. "The entity you encountered is known as a shadow," she explained. "It's a malevolent spirit that feeds on fear and despair. It's anchored to this location, likely because of a traumatic event in the past." Dr. Carter set up cameras and sensors throughout the restaurant, preparing for a long night of observation. As the night progressed, the equipment picked up strange readings, fluctuations in temperature, inexplicable shadows, and disembodied voices. In the early hours of the morning, the shadow appeared again. Dr. Carter and her team confronted it with a combination of technology and ritual. They used infrared lights, salt lines, and incantations to weaken the entity. The battle was intense, the air thick with tension as the shadow fought back. Finally, with a burst of energy, the shadow was forced into a containment device, a specially prepared mirror covered in runes. Dr. Carter sealed the mirror with wax and holy symbols, ensuring the entity could not escape. With the shadow contained, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. The cold spots vanished, and the sense of dread lifted. Business continued to thrive, and Sarah and Jake felt they could finally move on from the horrors they had faced. Dr. Carter advised them to keep the mirror in a safe place, warning that the entity was still dangerous and could escape if the seal was broken. They decided to place it in a hidden compartment in the basement, out of sight and out of mind. Years passed, and the bistro on Pine Street became one of the most popular spots in town. Sarah and Jake eventually expanded, opening a second location and hiring more staff. The story of the haunted kitchen became a local legend, a spooky tale to tell around Halloween. One evening, many years later, a new chef named Emily was cleaning the basement when she stumbled upon the hidden compartment. Curious, she opened it and found the old mirror, its surface covered in dust and wax. As she wiped it clean, the wax seal cracked, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Emily saw her reflection twist and distort, and for a brief moment, she saw the glowing red eyes of the shadow staring back at her. The following night, strange things began happening again. Pots and pans clanged together, and shadows flickered in the corners of the kitchen. Sarah and Jake, now older and wiser, knew immediately what had happened. They called Dr. Carter, who, now retired, guided them through the process of resealing the mirror. This time, they buried it deep in the forest, far from the restaurant, hoping the entity would never return. The bistro on Pine Street continued to thrive, but the legend of the shadow persisted. It became a cautionary tale for future generations, reminder that some secrets are best left buried, and some recipes are never meant to be made. And in the quiet moments, when the restaurant was empty and the lights were low, Sarah and Jake would sometimes hear a faint humming, a reminder of the darkness that once lurked behind the stove. In the bustling city of San Antonio, Texas, a small, family-owned restaurant called La Cocina de la Abuela was the talk of the town. Known for its authentic Mexican cuisine and warm, inviting atmosphere, it had been a staple in the community for decades. However, the restaurant had recently fallen on hard times. The beloved owner, Donna Maria, had passed away, and her grandson, Diego, had taken over. Despite his best efforts, the business was struggling. Diego, a talented chef with dreams of making his grandmother proud, decided to revamp the restaurant's menu and interior in hopes of attracting new customers. He poured his heart and soul into the project, determined to breathe new life into La Cocina de la Abuela. As he cleaned and renovated, he discovered an old, dust-covered recipe book hidden in a secret compartment in the kitchen. The book, bound in worn leather and filled with handwritten recipes, appeared to be a treasure trove of Donna Maria's culinary secrets. Diego was thrilled. He believed this book could be the key to saving the restaurant. However, he was unaware that the book contained more than just recipes. It held dark, supernatural secrets that would soon unleash a series of terrifying events. Diego eagerly began to incorporate the recipes from the book into the menu. Each dish was met with rave reviews from the customers, who marveled at the rich, authentic flavors. The restaurant's reputation quickly improved, and business started to boom. Diego was overjoyed and felt closer to his grandmother than ever before. One night, as Diego prepared a special dish called El Plato de los Muertos, a strange feeling washed over him. The air grew cold, and the kitchen lights flickered. He shrugged it off as a power surge and continued cooking. As he plated the dish, he noticed something odd. A faint, ghostly figure appeared in the reflection of the kitchen window. Startled, he turned around, but there was no one there. Diego dismissed the incident as his imagination playing tricks on him, but similar occurrences became more frequent. The kitchen staff reported seeing shadows moving on their own, utensils clattering without reason, and eerie whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Fear began to spread among the employees, and some even quit their jobs, unable to handle the unexplainable happenings. Determined to understand what was happening, Diego decided to investigate the history of the restaurant and his grandmother's recipe book. He visited his elderly aunt, Esperanza, who had lived in the family home for years. When he showed her the book, her face turned pale, and she trembled with fear. "Diego, you must return this book to where you found it," she warned. "This is no ordinary recipe book. It is cursed." Esperanza revealed a chilling family secret. Donna Maria had been a gifted cook, but she was also known to dabble in the occult. The recipe book contained ancient rituals and spells intertwined with culinary instructions. These rituals were believed to summon spirits and harness supernatural forces to enhance the flavors of the dishes. Diego was skeptical but couldn't ignore the strange occurrences at the restaurant. He decided to heed his aunt's warning and stop using the recipes from the book. However, the spirits that had been summoned were not so easily dismissed. The more Diego tried to distance himself from the cursed recipes, the worse the hauntings became. The restaurant's once inviting atmosphere turned sinister. Customers began to report seeing ghostly apparitions and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The once thriving business started to decline again, and Diego felt helpless. One night, as Diego was closing up the restaurant, he heard a faint crying coming from the kitchen. He followed the sound and found a young girl, no older than 8, standing by the stove. She was dressed in old-fashioned clothing and had a sorrowful expression on her face. "Who are you?" Diego asked, his voice trembling. I'm Isabella, the girl replied. I used to work here a long time ago. Diego was puzzled. But you're just a child. How could you have worked here? Isabella's eyes filled with tears. My family and I were enslaved by a cruel master who owned this land. We were forced to work in the kitchen, and when we tried to escape, he cursed us to remain here forever. Diego's heart ached for the girl. He knew he had to do something to help her and the other trapped spirits. He decided to seek the help of a local curandera, a healer known for her knowledge of the supernatural. Diego met with the curandera, Dona Rosa, who listened intently to his story. She explained that the spirits were bound to the restaurant by the dark rituals in the recipe book. To free them, they would need to perform a cleansing ritual to break the curse. The ritual required several ingredients, including sage, salt, and holy water, as well as a personal item from each of the trapped spirits. Diego and Dona Rosa returned to the restaurant, where they began the arduous task of gathering the necessary items. Isabella guided them to hidden spots where the personal items were concealed, and soon they were ready to perform the ritual. As they chanted the ancient incantations, the air grew heavy with a malevolent presence. Shadows twisted and writhed around them, and the temperature dropped to an icy chill. Diego felt a hand grip his shoulder, and when he turned, he saw the vengeful spirit of the cruel master who had cursed the land. You cannot break the curse, the spirit hissed. These souls belong to me. Summoning all his courage, Diego continued the ritual. The room filled with a blinding light, and the spirits let out agonized screams. The dark presence of the master fought back, but Dona Rosa's chants grew louder and more powerful. Finally, with a burst of energy, the curse was shattered, and the spirits were freed. As the light faded, the spirits of Isabella and the others appeared before Diego, their expressions now peaceful and grateful. Isabella stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears of joy. Thank you, Diego, she whispered. We are finally free. Diego felt a wave of relief and sadness wash over him. He had grown attached to Isabella and the other spirits, but he knew this was their time to move on. One by one, the spirits vanished, leaving behind a sense of calm and tranquility in the restaurant. La Cocina de la Abuela began to thrive once more, free from the dark influences that had plagued it. Diego continued to honor his grandmother's legacy, creating new recipes inspired by her teachings but without the use of the cursed book. In the end, Diego learned that true success comes from the heart, not from dark magic. The story of La Cocina de la Abuela became a legend in San Antonio, a reminder of the power of love, family, and the strength to overcome even the darkest of curses. Years passed, and La Cocina de la Abuela flourished under Diego's careful guidance. The restaurant was not just a place to eat but a gathering spot for the community, filled with laughter, stories, and the aromas of authentic Mexican cuisine. Diego married, had children, and life seemed perfect. However, the tranquility was short-lived. One stormy night, a stranger entered the restaurant just before closing. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, and his clothes were soaked from the rain. He took a seat at the bar, and Diego, ever the gracious host, approached him. Welcome to La Cocina de la Abuela. What can I get for you? Diego asked, forcing a smile despite the uneasy feeling that settled in his chest. The stranger lifted his head, revealing piercing, cold eyes. "I heard you have a special recipe book. One that belonged to your grandmother." Diego's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." The stranger chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Oh, but you do. And I want it." Before Diego could respond, the stranger's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and the temperature in the room plummeted. The once familiar feeling of dread returned, stronger than ever. Diego realized with horror that the curse was not truly broken. The malevolent force had found its way back. The stranger revealed himself to be a dark entity, one that had been manipulating the master who cursed the land and now sought to reclaim the power within the recipe book. Diego knew he had to protect his family and the restaurant from this evil force. He reached out to Dona Rosa, who had become a trusted friend and advisor. Together, they devised a plan to banish the entity once and for all. They gathered the ingredients for a powerful exorcism ritual, one that would require every ounce of their strength and courage. The night of the exorcism, the restaurant was closed to the public. Diego, Dona Rosa, and a few trusted friends gathered in the kitchen, surrounded by protective symbols and candles. The air was thick with tension as they began the ritual. The entity appeared, its form shifting and writhing in the shadows. It unleashed a barrage of terrifying illusions, trying to break their concentration. Images of Dona Maria suffering, the enslaved spirits, and Diego's worst fears materialized before them. But Diego and his friends held strong. They recited the incantations, their voices growing louder and more determined. The entity roared in anger, its power waning under the relentless assault of their combined will. As the ritual reached its climax, the entity made a desperate move. It targeted Diego, attempting to possess him and use his body to escape the exorcism. Diego felt the cold tendrils of the entity's presence invade his mind, and he struggled to maintain control. Dona Rosa's voice cut through the darkness. "Diego, remember why you're fighting. Remember your family, your grandmother, and the souls you freed." Drawing on his love for his family and his determination to honor his grandmother's legacy, Diego found the strength to push back against the entity. He focused on the memories of the happy times in the restaurant, the laughter, the love, and the joy that La Cocina de la Abuela had brought to so many. With a final, forceful push, Diego expelled the entity from his mind. The exorcism ritual reached its peak, and the entity let out a final, ear-splitting scream before being banished from the restaurant forever. The morning after the exorcism, the sun rose over San Antonio, casting a warm glow over La Cocina de la Abuela. The restaurant was filled with a sense of peace and renewal. Diego, exhausted but triumphant, knew that they had finally vanquished the dark force that had haunted their lives. Word of the exorcism spread throughout the community, and La Cocina de la Abuela became more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of resilience, courage, and the enduring power of love and family. Diego continued to run the restaurant, passing on the traditions and stories to his children. And although the recipe book remained hidden away, its dark secrets never to be used again, the true legacy of La Cocina de la Abuela lived on in the hearts of all who stepped through its doors. In the end, Diego learned that the greatest recipes are those made with love, not magic. And the most powerful forces in the world are the bonds of family and the strength of the human spirit.